A South Carolina house fire conceals evidence of a contract killing. When a second death is discovered, police connect the two incidents and suspect a group of businessmen who will kill to protect their interests and settle scores. Agents must use their own tricks and their own criminal contacts to uncover the truth and stop the cutthroat conspirators.
Murder for hire is a complex crime. Solving it means finding the killer and whoever paid for the hit. In South Carolina, a death first ruled accidental was no accident. But that was just the beginning. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents discovered greed, betrayal, and shady dealings, and found that sometimes family ties can strangle.
Florence County, South Carolina, lies at the heart of the state. An area where farmland meets swampland. And the working poor live side by side with the wealthiest families. Most residents of the small town of Atlanta lead quiet, rural lives, 25 miles from the city of Florence. But in the late 80s, a hidden danger began to disrupt the quiet. On the morning of June 10th, 1987, the volunteers of the Atlanta Rural Fire Department responded to a farmhouse fire outside of town. By the time they reached the scene, the house was engulfed in flames. It was the home of William Graham, a wealthy tobacco farmer well known in the small community. The firefighters struggled to control the flames, knowing the elderly Graham lived alone and might be inside.
That's command. Go ahead, let us see.
After 90 minutes, they finally extinguished the blaze. Investigators searched the gutted house, and in the bedroom, found Graham's body lying in his charred bed. After the body was removed, arson investigators searched for the cause of the fire. Burn patterns showed it began there in the bedroom. Chemical tests on the furniture, floor, and walls indicated that no accelerant was used to fuel the blaze. Near the fire's point of origin were several electrical outlets. The investigators believed it had been an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring in the farmhouse. They ruled the blaze accidental. At autopsy, a pathologist noted massive burn injuries and evidence of smoke in the victim's lungs. Deciding there was no need for x-rays, he concluded Graham's death was a result of asphyxiation due to carbon monoxide poisoning. County Prosecutor Dudley Salibi read about the case in the local papers.
Even though the autopsy had not indicated foul play, and even though there was no manifest evidence of arson, there were rumors throughout the Atlanta community that Mr. Graham had died as a result of foul play.
Sheriff's investigators followed up on the rumors, interviewing Graham's neighbors and friends. Some mentioned Graham had lately become paranoid about a murder plot against him. But police found nothing solid to prompt a homicide investigation. After checking every lead, the sheriff's office closed the case. Then, 7 months later, in January 1988, a hunter in nearby Clarendon County spotted a mound of dirt in a field. Checking it out, he made a grim discovery: human remains. He called police. Investigators determined the body had been placed in a grave only 10 inches deep and likely unearthed by scavenging animals. There was no evidence nearby to indicate who the victim was or how he died. The pathologist used dental records to identify the victim as Darnell Rhodes, reported missing a month earlier. Rhodes had been shot once in the back, twice in the face, and 5 times behind the left ear. A brutal murder, especially in this quiet community. At the time, no one had any reason to connect it to the farmer's fiery death 7 months earlier. The county sheriff's department wanted to bring in more resources since the violence was so extreme. So they called the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED. Lieutenant Gary Martin, one of the investigative experts at SLED headquarters in Columbia, knew to be ready for anything.
Always expect the unexpected. Things aren't always the way they appear, and there can always be additional circumstances involving a case.
SLED agents and sheriff's detectives began by visiting area hangouts the victim, Darnell Rhodes, was known to frequent. Many knew the man and said that around the time of his disappearance, Rhodes was usually seen with a friend named Charles McCrae. The rumors were that Rhodes and McCrae were professional henchmen committing crimes for wealthy businessmen in the area. Investigators wanted to know who these men were, but no one would offer any names.
Numerous people in the Atlanta community stated that they had seen Charles McCrae with Rhodes the day before he was reported missing.
Investigators learned that after Rhodes went missing, McCrae hinted that he had killed him. To get the truth behind the rumors, investigators needed to talk to Charles McCrae. At about the same time, someone filed burglary and assault charges against McCrae that were unrelated to the Rhodes case. Clarendon County detectives decided to arrest him on those charges, hoping they could get him to talk about Rhodes.
State Canada will be used against you in a court of law. The right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you're being questioned.
At SLED headquarters, investigators explained the witness statements they had regarding McCrae discussing the murder of Rhodes.
You want to relate that to us right now?
The suspect said he might be willing to cooperate if he could protect 2 family members who helped him after Rhodes was dead, according to SLED agent James Gamble.
He said his nephew helped him dispose of the body and that he used his sister's automobile and that he didn't want his family being involved or accused of any part of this murder because they were not guilty. We'll do whatever we can to keep them from being involved.
When they agreed not to prosecute the others, McCrae admitted to shooting Rhodes to keep him quiet. He explained Rhodes had been talking to people about the murder of tobacco farmer William Graham.
Initially, the response from law enforcement was, no, there's no indication that that was a homicide. But then he gave them information which indicated that it was a homicide and which reopened the entire investigation.
McCrae claimed he had been hired to kill Graham and burn his house down. He said he broke into Graham's home late on the night of June 9th, 1987. McCrae found Graham asleep in the bedroom. He used a small caliber handgun, point blank behind the ear. McCrae stole the pistol Graham kept for protection. To cover the crime, he stuffed newspapers under the bed and lit them. As he left, he turned the lights on to make the growing fire less noticeable from a distance. McCrae sold both the gun he stole and the murder weapon to a friend. The agents asked who put him up to the killing. At first, he was afraid to say.
Did these two guys tell you why they wanted you to kill William Graham?
But eventually, he cracked. McCrae said it was two men, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, business partners of Graham. Prince and Marshall hired him through an intermediary.
Hey, what's up? Okay, I got this old guy, William Graham. It's gotta look like an accident. Okay, fire, I'm thinking. Yeah, I can do that. All right.
They offered him $20,000 for the hit. The agents knew of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, prominent local businessmen, both millionaires. They also knew that if they went up against the pair before a local jury, they would need more than McCrae's word to prove a murder conspiracy. And they worried Prince and Marshall might get to McCrae and make him change his story. On April 18, 1988, 10 months after William Graham's death, agents secured a warrant to exhume the tobacco farmer's body. Law enforcement needed to look for evidence that somehow escaped them the first time, that Graham had been shot to death. X-rays taken during the second autopsy revealed two .32 caliber slugs in Graham's skull and a small entrance wound behind his left ear. A pathologist removed the projectiles so they could be compared to the murder weapon. Sled agents recovered the gun McCrae sold to his friend. Ballistics examiners noted similarities between the grooves etched into the slugs and those in the pistol's barrel. They determined that gun could have fired the bullets that killed Graham. More evidence implicating Charles McCrae. But investigators also needed evidence on the men who allegedly hired him. Graham's former business partners, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince. Prince's involvement with the victim went well beyond business. Graham had been his father figure.
Bill Prince had been raised by William Graham from the time he was a teenager. They became business partners, and as a result of being business partners, they took out a $500,000 insurance policy out on each other.
Prosecutor Salibi worked with the sled agents developing the insurance motive.
We found out that Mr. Prince had contacted the insurance company many times immediately after Mr. Graham's death, wanting to know how quickly he could collect the proceeds. In fact, he even volunteered to fly up to where the company was located and collect the check.
Investigators learned that Bill Prince made $500,000 off William Graham's death. Prince had also tried to control Graham's burial proceedings.
We talked with the funeral home that handled Mr. Graham's burial and found out that Mr. Prince had offered to pay for the burial if the body was going to be cremated, which of course would probably have destroyed the evidence of the projectiles that were still in his corpse.
Authorities made no effort to hide their investigation of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, and discovered that the men had lost $400,000 to Graham in a recent lawsuit. And 2 weeks before he died, Graham had filed a second suit against them. A compelling financial motive, yet it was only circumstantial evidence against two millionaires not easily intimidated by the law.
No one was charged other than Mr. McCrae initially, because the only indication we had that others were involved were from Mr. McCrae. There were no corroborating witnesses, there was no physical evidence.
Then investigators' early fears were realized. The one witness they did have backed down.
Mr. McCrae soon recanted his story and refused to cooperate, so there was nothing to support what he was saying about others being involved.
Perhaps someone had gotten to McCrae and convinced him not to cooperate. In any case, investigators needed a new break in order to pursue Prince and Marshall. In December 1988, that break would emerge in a South Carolina cemetery. In 1988, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division agents investigated an arson and alleged murder for hire in the death of William Graham. When Charles McCrae confessed to the killing, he said that millionaire businessmen Bill Prince and Larry Marshall hired him for the hit. But then McCrae recanted and the investigation stalled. 8 months later, a lawyer asked SLED agents to meet him in a local cemetery.
What FBI? Yes.
He said he represented a man named Fred Peachy Andrews, who had information on the case.
Is that he knows who killed Mr. Graham.
What's the situation?
He's very nervous. The first thing he wants is protection.
SLED agent James Gamble.
The lawyer explained to us that Mr. Andrews was fearful of his life because he knew a good bit about the murder of Mr. William Graham.
The attorney said Andrews wanted to talk to authorities discreetly, so they set up a meeting. In a parking lot the next day, Fred Andrews spoke with SLED agents James Gamble and Gary Martin. He said he used to run an illegal gambling operation out of his office, and through that operation, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall came to him about a contract killing.
They had approached Peaches to either kill or find someone to kill William Graham because they thought Peaches had all these underworld contacts because he was running these poker houses and he'd going back and forth to Las Vegas, things of that nature.
And they got some other guy.
He said Prince offered $20,000 for the hit, but later told him that Charles McCrae had been hired instead. When McCrae started talking to the cops, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince began calling Andrews, threatening him to keep quiet. Prosecutor Dudley Salibi.
He was threatened not to reveal what he knew. That had the opposite result of sending him to law enforcement.
Andrews agreed to help get more evidence against Prince and Marshall and set up a tape recorder on his home phone. If the men called again, he would be ready. It wasn't long before Bill Prince did call.
You know who this is?
Once again, Prince brought up the Graham investigation. He said he heard Andrews was talking to SLED, and he and Larry Marshall needed to be sure he wasn't ratting on them. but this time it was caught on tape.
That kind of talk can get a person killed.
Bill Prince stated to Fred Andrews that if it's true what I hear that you're saying to law enforcement, a lot of people could get hurt.
You're gonna pay the price.
To me, that implied that for his own safety, he should not cooperate with law enforcement.
It appeared Prince was willing to kill his father figure for money and any witness against him to keep them quiet. Sled agents and prosecutors put together their case against Prince and Marshall. They had the original statement of the alleged hitman Charles McCrae, physical proof that Graham had been shot to death, the statement of Fred Andrews that Prince and Marshall ordered the murder, and the tapes of calls threatening Andrews not to cooperate with police in the investigation.
We gathered all the information that we could. We went to the Florence County Grand Jury, presented the case, and they were indicted for the death of William Graham.
Investigators secured arrest warrants for the two businessmen. On April 6, 1989, deputies and agents arrested Bill Prince outside a real estate office. He was charged with solicitation of murder, conspiracy, and accessory before the fact of murder. When Larry Marshall heard of Prince's arrest, he tried to run.
Sir, can you step out of the car, please? What's this all about, officer?
But another arrest team found him driving out of town. They arrested him on the same charges in connection with Graham's murder. On May 6, 1991, at the Florence County Courthouse, the trial of Bill Prince, Charles McCrae, and Larry Marshall began.
What conversation did you have with Mr. Prince?
The state's key witness was Fred Andrews.
And, he said someone needed to be killed. And he said that man was William Graham.
He testified about Prince and Marshall approaching him about killing Graham and then threatening him after McCrae was arrested.
20,000. Yes, sir. Thank you. No more questions for this witness, Your Honor.
You may step down.
The jury heard about the two businessmen warning Andrews not to talk to police about the murder.
No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor. So noted.
On May 14, 1991, the local jury convicted Bill Prince and Larry Marshall of accessory before the fact and solicitation of murder. They also found Prince guilty of murder conspiracy, but it wouldn't last. The jury convicted Charles McCrae of burglary and conspiracy. But then, surprisingly, they acquitted him on the murder and arson charges.
You may approach.
Attorneys for the millionaires jumped at the apparent legal contradiction. They argued that since McCrae was acquitted of Graham's murder, their clients should be granted new trials. The judge agreed, overturning the jury's verdict, and released Prince and Marshall on $100,000 bond. The Florence County Solicitor's Office appealed to the state Supreme Court, asking that the guilty verdict stand. After 2 frustrating years of delays, the South Carolina Supreme Court delivered its opinion in December 1993. The court granted Larry Marshall a new, separate trial, citing insufficient evidence against him alone, showing intent to have Graham killed. Prosecutors decided not to pursue a new trial. There was more evidence showing Bill Prince actively sought a hitman to kill Graham. To the Supreme Court, Prince did order the murder. Legally, it did not matter who carried it out.
Ultimately, South Carolina Supreme Court upheld Mr. Prince's convictions for conspiracy, for solicitation, and accessory before the fact of murder, which carries a life sentence.
Prince's bond was revoked on August 29, 1994.
Miss Prince.
A team of investigators went to his home to take him into custody. He was to be held to await sentencing. But his wife said he had been gone for days. Agents searched the house but found no sign of him or where he went. Prince's truck was also missing, and investigators learned he had liquidated $190,000 worth of property. He had a head start and plenty of money with which to run and plan his next hit. After being found guilty of murder for hire, South Carolina millionaire Bill Prince jumped bond before sentencing. Days later, a South Carolina state trooper responded to a call about an abandoned vehicle. When he ran the plates, he learned it belonged to the fugitive, Bill Prince. It was sitting by the woods near Lake Santee, South Carolina, on the way to Georgia. Two major interstates, 95 and 26, intersect in the area. An easy escape in any direction.
Same license plate.
Believing Prince had fled the state, authorities contacted the FBI field office in Columbia, South Carolina. Special Agent Joe Youngener was assigned the case.
The sheriff's office said that they had contacted his friends and his relatives, and they did not know where he was. Once we obtained federally an unlawful flight to avoid confinement warrant, then we started looking for Mr. Prince throughout the United States.
They needed to narrow the scope of the search.
I learned at that time that Bill Prince had a brother, Don Prince, who lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, and was an insurance businessman. And he had taken over some of the business affairs for Bill Prince.
They believed he might also be helping to hide his brother.
We decided not to interview Don Prince because we did not think we would get his cooperation.
Instead, Wilmington agents developed cooperating informants in his neighborhood.
Morning, sir. This is Agent Henderson. I'm Agent Williams.
When they knew Don was at work, they interviewed neighbors and explained they were conducting a federal investigation that required discretion.
Yeah, that's my neighbors.
Several recalled seeing Bill Prince with Don and agreed to help.
Well, let me leave the business card with you and ask that you give me a call.
And they knew Don Prince's comings and goings, where he went to work, where he lived, and proceeded to watch this and report to the FBI in Wilmington.
Within days, the plan worked. One neighbor spotted the Prince brothers outside Don's house. As promised, he contacted the FBI.
The Wilmington FBI office notified me that this lookout had actually seen Bill Prince there at the house, at the residence.
You asked me to... Yes. Yeah, they're down in Dijon.
By the time the FBI got the information, he was gone.
The many waterways of Wilmington would provide escape routes few would notice. Agents maintained surveillance on Don Prince, hoping he would lead them to his brother. But catching up with the millionaire fugitive wasn't easy.
Bill Prince was harder to catch than the usual fugitive because he had virtually unlimited resources. Bill Prince and Don Prince were both successful businessmen. They had money, they had cars, they had boats, and they had airplanes. They had offshore contacts, and they moved around. And once Bill Prince was able to solicit his brother's help in hiding him, this caused it to be a more difficult fugitive case. The FBI received information that Bill Prince may be in Puerto Rico, may be in the Bahamas, he may be in Wilmington, North Carolina, he may be in Florida.
Agents responded to every reliable sighting in these areas accessible by boat and small plane. But each time, Bill Prince was gone when they arrived. Soon the FBI learned Bill's brother Don was doing more than hiding him.
We also received information that Don Prince had contacted witnesses who had testified against Bill Prince, trying to get these witnesses to recant their testimony so that Bill Prince could get a new trial.
I'm an associate of Mr. Prince.
An intermediary for the Princes tried to get witness Fred Peachy Andrews to sign an affidavit swearing to new testimony.
Testimony at Mr. Prince's trial might be in your best.
But Andrews had no interest in changing his story.
I don't want to sign anything that has anything to do with any of you guys. You got that?
It really might be in your best interest. You need to take a look at this.
Yeah, I hear you.
His testimony would stand. But Don Prince convinced 20 other witnesses against his brother to sign the affidavits. Andrews was the holdout. By December 1994, Bill Prince had been gone from Atlanta, South Carolina for 4 months. Several times, his people had reached out to Peachy Andrews to get him to recant. Finally, on one chilly December night, someone tried to eliminate him.
Peachy informed the Florence County Sheriff's Office that someone had shot at him at his residence. This was a consequence, we suppose, of him testifying against Bill Prince. However, no one was ever captured, no arrest was ever made.
After the attack on Andrews, Larry Marshall came to the FBI asking for protection, fearing Prince would have him killed. Agents needed to find the fugitive before anyone else in the community got hurt. The FBI developed an informant close to Prince who was afraid to be seen talking to cops. So they slipped him the phone number to a dedicated answering machine at the field office, asking him to leave any tips he had on the machine. In August 1995, the informant called in.
Hey, I got a number for him. It's a pager. 423-555-2769.
The pager's billing address was a motel room in Knoxville, Tennessee. The Knoxville FBI office sent a surveillance team to the motel. They set up outside the room and waited. After several hours, they spotted a man resembling Prince.
He had changed his appearance from the way that we knew Bill Prince. He was wearing a straw hat, he had a suntan, and he had on a casual shirt. And the agents realized that this was the fugitive, Bill Prince. He first said that he was not Bill Prince, but then once they started talking with him, he acknowledged the fact who he was, and they arrested him.
After a year on the run, Bill Prince was finally going to prison. But even prison would not stop his orders for violence. After 52-year-old millionaire fugitive Bill Prince was captured, he was sentenced to life for murder for hire at the Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, South Carolina. Bill Prince would not be eligible for parole until he was 72 years old. His brother Don often visited. At the time, the convict was allowed unmonitored visits. Authorities had no idea what the two discussed, what they were planning. They only knew that Bill Prince wanted out, and that his attempts to get a new trial had failed. Prince wasn't willing to give up. 2 months into his sentence, he began talking with a fellow inmate about revenge and murder. The inmate said he could orchestrate murders for hire through his contacts on the outside. Prince wanted 5 men killed. Fred Andrews, the main witness against him. Larry Marshall, his former co-defendant. Agent James Gamble, who helped put him away. An elderly man on whom he held life insurance. And even his own son, whom he thought was conspiring with Marshall to take over his fortunes. But Prince made a critical mistake. That inmate was an informant for the FBI. He worked for Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer of the FBI's Columbia, South Carolina field office.
Having informants in the prison system is almost as important as having them out on the street. It's paramount to have as much information coming out of the prison system as we can get, so it's important to maintain good contact inside. And they talk to the other inmates in the institution. A lot of times we'll find out what happens from talking to an inmate source.
The source told Weisenhofer about Prince's request for 5 contract killings.
The story was something that was hard to believe because it was so incredible and something that you'd really see on television or read in the paper, but not really an everyday thing.
Weisenhofer spoke to Special Agent Joe Youngener in Florence to ask about Prince's history.
Joe right away said, that all fits with everything that's happened, and I would not doubt that this guy's trying it again.
The informant was scheduled for knee surgery, so the agent met him in the privacy of the infirmary. Weisenhofer was not surprised to hear Bill Prince had his brother's help in the murder-for-hire plots.
Bill Prince was willing to pay a hitman, and the payment would come through his brother, Don Prince.
The informant said the brothers wanted to start by killing Andrews.
We asked the prison informant to play along with Bill Prince because we needed to corroborate what he was telling us. We were concerned that Bill Prince was attempting to find a hitman. We didn't want him to do that before we could intercept him. And so we decided to play the role of the hitman.
The informant would orchestrate the hit on Andrews, then arrange a meeting between the fake hitman and Don Prince, where they could complete the payoff and plan the other murders.
Based on this.
Agents from SLED and the FBI prepared for the sting. Bill Prince was just as dangerous inside the prison walls as he had been outside, as long as Don Prince was out there willing to do anything to help his brother.
Bill Prince and his brother Don Prince.
Investigators needed to stop the two by securing clear evidence of a murder conspiracy. According to SLED agent Billy Chastain,
Bill and Don Prince were not only brothers, they were true partners in crime. We needed to build a case not only against Bill Prince, but against his brother, who was not incarcerated and had never been incarcerated for any serious crime before. And we felt like we had to tie the two in a conspiracy to make it work.
the informant met with Prince and told him he had found a man for the job.
He said that the hitman was a member of a motorcycle gang and that for $5,000 the hitman would kill Peachy Andrews, and Bill Prince took him up on the offer.
The informant said he only needed to know where Andrews lived.
Bill actually drew a map for the informant. We then had that map mailed to us by the informant. When we checked it, it was real.
The map led agents directly to Fred Andrews' house. More circumstantial evidence of the brothers' conspiracy.
Mr. Andrews, FBI.
The agents met with Andrews and told him about the hit ordered against him.
No, sir. We don't have time.
They offered Andrews protection and requested his help with the sting operation.
We needed something that would spur a conversation between the informant and Bill Prince, and we decided that the way to do that would be to tell Bill that the hit had taken place.
Andrews agreed to help provide proof he had been killed. Agents staged a photograph of Andrews as the apparent victim of an execution. They would get the photo to Bill Prince with the story that the hitman took it after the murder. Then Andrews would go into hiding, further supporting the story of his death. At the prison infirmary, agents gave the photo to their informant. They also wired him for his meeting with Prince. They wanted to get Prince on tape, making arrangements to pay the hitman through his brother. So far, they had very little incriminating Don Prince.
We had to prove to Bill that the murder had indeed taken place so he can pass that along to his brother, who was really the hidden man in this whole deal, because he was slick and he always worked under the table.
The informant met with Bill in the prison yard, handing off the staged murder photo. But there was a problem. Prince said he did not believe it was Peachy Andrews in the photo, claiming his beard looked different.
Yeah, with that. I can't see what it is. That's what that looks like.
One more complication in a frustrating case. South Carolina investigators faked the contract killing of government witness Fred Peachy Andrews, trying to catch brothers Bill and Don Prince in the first of 5 murder-for-hire plots.
Wasn't enough.
A prison informant showed Bill Prince the picture of the hit, but reported to agents that Prince did not believe it was Andrews in the photo. Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer had to convince Prince and get it on tape.
Bill Prince had asked several questions. One, what type of ring was Peachy Andrews wearing, and what did his the tags on his car say?
Let's do it again.
Agents gave the informant the details he needed and sent him back to meet with Prince. The informant told Prince he just spoke with the hitman by telephone. He gave him the information requested about the ring and the license plate.
Ring drives a blue Oldsmobile, license plate NEB 531.
Prince was still skeptical. He told the informant he needed more to be convinced.
Oh. Another day in paradise. What's more proof?
Frustrated, Special Agent Joe Youngener decided to add one more ruse to the investigation and planted a rumor that might help.
Joe Youngener over in Florence mentioned to a newspaper reporter there that he should check the police impound lot in Florence County. When the reporter went by the impound lot, he noticed Peachy Andrews' car was there. Mr. Andrews is sort of a local character, and that car was well known around Florence. So when the reporter saw that car, he put 2 and 2 together and realized that that Peachy Andrews, who had been an important witness in the Bill Prince trial, was missing.
Conducting interviews, the reporter learned Fred Andrews had not been seen for over a week, and people were beginning to talk that something had happened to him. What he did not know was that Andrews was holed up in an FBI safe house. On December 14th, 1995, the reporter published a story about Andrews' disappearance. When Don Prince read the column, he brought it to his brother Bill.
They were huddled together in the meeting room, and it was apparent they didn't want anyone else to hear what was going on.
It looked like Bill Prince was finally convinced that Andrews had been murdered.
Thank you. See you later.
Now he would set up the payoff through the prison informant in a conversation taped by the FBI.
Don Prince left the institution and traveled on I-20 to a rest area about 65, 70 miles from Lee Correctional Institute, where he was told to look for a biker-type individual at the picnic area.
That biker type was, in fact, a SLED agent.
We had placed the undercover agent out at a table by himself so he'd be away from any traffic. We weren't sure how Don Prince was going to react when he was arrested, and we'd heard he always carried a gun.
Other agents watched from nearby to videotape the meeting and make the arrest. The rendezvous time was 5 p.m. The prearranged code was for Don Prince to ask directions to Turbeville, a town across the state. At 5:20, the subject pulled up.
Don Prince walked down and asked him where was Turbeville.
Must be done.
Special Agent Weisenhofer posed as a motorist using the telephone. Agent Chastain and the others prepared to move on his signal.
Our code was when Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone, then everybody would approach Mr. Prince.
The undercover agent said he was ready to do the next hit against Larry Marshall. But Prince said they wanted to wait until things cooled down.
Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone and confronted Prince. As I arrived, Don Prince put his hands up initially and put his left hand toward his pocket. And at that time, I brought him down to the ground, and then we effected the arrest.
Come on, buddy. Come back here. Come on, man.
After we arrested Don Prince and put him in handcuffs, we picked him up off the ground, and as I was bringing him up off the ground, he said the things you do for your brother, and was coming to the realization of what had happened to him at that point.
Agents recovered Don's gun from his car. His brother Bill was expecting to hear the payoff had taken place, but instead would soon learn Don had been arrested, and their days of ordering contract killings were over.
The Prince brothers are the most vicious individuals that I've ever been around. Bill and Don Prince are cold-hearted murderers in our eyes, and obviously in the court's eyes too.
Bill Prince, already serving a life sentence, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to an additional 22 years in federal prison. His brother Don was sentenced to 17.5 years for his role in the murder-for-hire plot.
It was a huge team effort between SLED and the FBI, and we were actually able to save some lives. But it's really gratifying when you realize at the end of the day that people probably would have been killed if we weren't there.
Bill Prince was moved to administrative segregation. No more unmonitored visits. No more murder plots.